I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who gets cheated on. The dude who finds out his wife is getting horizontal with someone else while pretending to work on our relationship. But here I am, telling my story like a cautionary tale, a lesson learned the hard way. Let me backtrack a bit. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for about 6 years. We were that couple that everyone thought was perfect. You know the type. We laughed together, went on adventures, and made plans for a future that seemed bright. But as anyone who's been in a long-term relationship knows, the sheen can wear off. Life gets busy. Bills pile up. We began to drift, which is why we started seeing a couples therapist, Dr. Thompson. It was supposed to help us reconnect, but instead, it became the backdrop for a deceit I never saw coming. Around the time we started therapy, I noticed some changes in Sarah. She seemed distant, distracted during our sessions, and often snapped at me over the smallest things. I brushed it off as part of the process of tackling our issues, but as the weeks passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She would get dressed up for her individual therapy sessions, something that never happened before. I thought she was just trying to impress Dr. Thompson, thinking it was part of her progress. Little did I know, she was dressing up for someone else entirely. The real unraveling began when I was reviewing our credit card statements one night. I was organizing the bills and noticed some weird hotel charges that made my stomach drop. 3 nights in a row, same hotel, same room charged to her card. The hotel was a well-known spot downtown, romantic, cozy, the kind of place you'd expect to book for a getaway. The name tugged at me like a bad dream. My blood ran cold as I recalled the dates, the same nights she had been busy with her sessions. I felt like an idiot looking at it all come together like pieces of a puzzle I had unwittingly ignored. My heart was racing as I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and a profound sadness begin to set in. That night I confronted her when she came home. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, bracing myself for the storm I was expecting to unleash. She looked at me with confusion, a look I had seen too often lately, like she was hiding something but didn't know how to conceal it. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice pitched higher than normal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I found some hotel charges on our credit card. 3 nights, the same place you said you were at therapy. Care to explain?" Her face paled, and for a fleeting moment I thought I might see the truth flash across her features. "Those were just sessions, honey. You know how we talked about individual therapy," she stammered, her voice faltering. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to concoct a believable excuse. I pressed on, not letting her off the hook. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I've seen the changes. You've been acting differently. I just want the truth." Her eyes darted away from mine, and I knew then that I was right. I felt the anger boiling inside me, rising like a tide that threatened to drown everything in its path. "Okay, fine. I've been seeing someone else," she finally blurted out, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think. I mean, it's complicated. Dr. Thompson was just what?" I interjected, my voice cold. "Your therapist. You cheated on me with our therapist." The reality crashed down around me. I could hardly process what she was saying. I was both enraged and devastated. How could she do this to me, to us? How could she turn our therapy sessions into a cover for her betrayal? As the confrontation unfolded, I felt my heart splitting open. It was like a movie scene, except this was real life, my life. I was standing there, looking into the eyes of a woman I thought I knew, and all I saw was someone who had lied and manipulated everything we had built. The emotional upheaval that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I was spiraling through a whirlwind of anger, disbelief, and deepest sadness. It felt like everything I had known was collapsing around me, and I was left holding the shattered pieces. I was lost, but I knew I had to make a decision. What would I do next? How could I even begin to process this? The thoughts raced through my mind like a freight train. Would I fight for my marriage, or was it time to cut my losses and walk away? As I stood there looking at Sarah, I felt a strange mix of pity and rage. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. But instead, I just felt this heaviness settle in my chest. The reality was sinking in, and I had a long road ahead of me. What I knew for certain was that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. I had to figure out my next steps carefully. I couldn't let my emotions drive my actions, but I also knew I deserved better than this. I was determined to reclaim my life, one way or another. The confrontation left us standing in a tense silence, the air thick with betrayal and disbelief. I could see the panic in Sarah's eyes, but I wasn't ready to offer her any sympathy. She had made her choice, and it was a brutal one. I felt like I was in a fog, everything around me blurring as I tried to process the reality of what had just happened. Why? I managed to ask, my voice low and trembling. Why would you do this? Why with Dr. Thompson of all people? I could hardly believe I was asking these questions, but the need for answers clawed at me. It's not that simple, she replied, trying to defend her actions. We were just connecting emotionally, you know. It just happened. I didn't plan for this. Connecting? I echoed, incredulous. While we were in therapy trying to fix our marriage, that's your excuse. It felt like a slap in the face to think she could justify her infidelity with some flimsy reasoning about emotional connections. Please, just let me explain, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I thought I could control it. I was confused and wanted something I felt I was missing, and Dr. Thompson, he was there. Her words stung. The rawness of her confession hit me like a fist to the gut. I shook my head, struggling to comprehend her reasoning. You thought you could control it. You're still lying. You knew it was wrong, Sarah. You had to have known. I didn't think it would go this far, she protested, her eyes welling with tears. I thought I could handle both therapy and him. I thought I could find out what I wanted and then we could work on our stuff. I felt a wave of fury surge through me. So, you thought you could just play house with both of us. You took our therapy sessions and turned them into your little rendezvous. At that moment, her demeanor changed. Instead of the frantic, emotional mess trying to win my forgiveness, she took a step back, crossing her arms defensively. You don't understand what I was feeling, she snapped. You've been so caught up in your own world that you didn't notice me slipping away. Maybe this was your fault too. Her words were like a slap. It was classic deflection, and it made my blood boil. I had poured my heart into our marriage, and now she was shifting the blame onto me. I can't believe you are actually trying to make this my fault, I said, incredulous. This is all on you, Sarah. You chose to betray my trust. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I turned away, needing space to breathe, to think. I felt torn between the man I was and the rage that was building inside me. What was I supposed to do now? In the days that followed, I was a ghost in my own home. I carried the weight of Sarah's betrayal like a leaden anchor around my neck. The arguments continued. She would plead for understanding, for forgiveness, while I oscillated between anger and heartbreak. I felt so helpless, like I was drowning in a sea of emotions. I found myself spending long hours at work, pretending everything was fine. I couldn't bear to be in the house we had built together, filled with memories that now felt tainted. I took long walks in the evening trying to clear my mind, but the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it clung to me. I reached out to some close friends for support, but even that felt unnatural. How do you explain to someone that your wife cheated on you with your couple's therapist? I felt a strange sense of shame, like I had failed. In some way, like I had been blindsided by a storm I should have seen coming. The emotional toll was exhausting. I found myself losing sleep over it, replaying our moments together, the laughter, the passion, the love, only to have them tainted by images of her with Dr. Thompson, laughing, sharing intimacy that should have been reserved for me. Each memory felt like a fresh wound, and I couldn't seem to escape the pain. I finally decided to confront Dr. Thompson, even though the thought of it made my stomach churn. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand how he could betray me like this, and how he could exploit the vulnerability we had shared in his office. I scheduled an appointment under the pretense of continuing therapy, but in my gut, I knew I was heading into a battle. I was filled with equal parts anger and determination as I walked into that office, ready to face the man who had manipulated our trust. The moment I stepped into Dr. Thompson's office, I felt a rush of adrenaline. His office was just as I remembered it, calm, comforting, with the faint scent of incense lingering in the air. But I was not there for comfort, I was there for confrontation. "Dr. Thompson," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension, "we need to talk." He looked up from his notes, surprise flickering across his face. "Of course I'm glad you came. How have you been feeling about the sessions?" "Cut the crap," I snapped, unable to mask the anger I felt. "I know about you and Sarah." His expression shifted and I watched as he processed my words. "What do you mean?" he asked, feigning innocence. I felt my temper flare. "The hotel charges, the lies, everything. You've been sleeping with my wife while pretending to help us fix our marriage. How could you do this?" The confrontation was electric, charged with all the hurt and rage I had bottled up inside. I was finally confronting the source of my pain, and it felt both terrifying and liberating. Dr. Thompson's demeanor changed. The calm, collected therapist facade crumbled away as he realized I wasn't there to play games. "This isn't what you think," he began, but I didn't let him finish. "You've crossed a line and you're going to pay for it," I said, my voice low and filled with menace. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." The realization that I had the power to expose him felt exhilarating. I was no longer the victim, I was taking control. I left his office feeling a mix of satisfaction and determination. I would not let them get away with this betrayal. In the days that followed, I began to strategize my next move. I needed to gather evidence, to collect everything that would help me take legal action if necessary. It was time to take back my power, to reclaim my life from the ashes of this betrayal. The emotional journey wasn't over, but I was done being passive. I owed it to myself to stand up for what I deserved. I was ready to face the fallout, to confront the consequences of their actions, and to draw a line in the sand. I would not let them break me. As I navigated this tumultuous sea of emotions and betrayal, I felt a fire igniting within me that I hadn't known existed. I wanted vengeance, but more importantly, I wanted to reclaim my dignity. I had spent too long as a passive participant in my own life, and now it was time to take action. After confronting Dr. Thompson, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to expose him for what he truly was. I began to collect evidence, starting with the hotel charges that had led me to uncover the affair in the first place. I went through our joint credit card statements meticulously, documenting every transaction. I even called the hotel to verify room numbers and dates, ensuring I had every detail lined up. In those first few days following my confrontation, it felt like I was living in a parallel universe. I was still waking up next to Sarah, pretending everything was normal while the truth weighed heavily on my shoulders. I could feel her eyeing me, trying to gauge my mood, but I was determined to keep my emotions under wraps. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much her betrayal had hurt me, at least not yet. One evening, after another excruciating dinner filled with forced small talk, I decided to confront her again. I felt ready to lay out everything I had discovered, not just to accuse her but to make her face the reality of her actions. I wanted her to see how her choices had impacted my life, our life. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk again." She looked up from her plate, the fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "What now?" she asked, irritation mingled with a hint of fear in her eyes. "I've been doing some digging," I said, leaning forward slightly, keeping my tone calm. "I have the hotel receipts and the dates. It's all right here." I pulled out the documents I had compiled, placing them on the table between us. I could see her face pale as she realized I was serious. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. "Can't we just move past this? I want to fix things." "Fix things?" I echoed incredulously. "How can we fix things when you've been lying and cheating on me? You think you can just sweep this under the rug?" She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms defensively. "I made a mistake. We were in a bad place. I thought I could find something outside of our marriage to fill the void." "Fill the void," I repeated, my anger boiling over. "You didn't just make a mistake, you made a series of choices that led to this. You betrayed my trust in the worst way imaginable." I watched as her bravado began to crumble. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I know I messed up. I'm just asking for another chance," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Another chance," I scoffed, feeling a mixture of rage and sadness. "Why should I believe you?" You were sneaking around behind my back with the one person I trusted to help us. I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own vulnerability. It was excruciating to admit that I had let my guard down only to be blindsided like this. The truth is, I don't know if I can forgive you. I continued, forcing myself to stay strong. You've shattered everything we built together. The trust is gone, and I don't know if I can ever get it back. Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I quickly pushed it away. This was not about her tears, it was about the destruction she had caused in my life. I need time to think, I said, rising from the table. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done. I can't just pretend like everything is fine. I left her sitting there, my heart heavy. I didn't want to be cruel, but I needed to be firm. This was a turning point for me, and I was finally beginning to recognize my own worth. As I spent the following days spiraling deeper into my thoughts, I began to consult with a lawyer. I wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but I wanted to understand my options. The marriage I had once cherished felt like a distant memory, and the thought of separation loomed large in my mind. The lawyer's office was stark and clinical. I sat across from a woman named Karen, who had clearly seen her fair share of marital disputes. She listened attentively as I recounted the events leading to my current situation, and I felt a sense of relief in finally voicing my story to someone who understood. I can help you navigate this, Karen said, her tone confident. You have a case, especially given the circumstances of the affair. We can file for divorce if that's what you decide. I found myself nodding, but with a heavy heart. The idea of divorce felt both liberating and terrifying. I had never imagined my life could end up this way, but I was beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Do you have evidence? She asked, and I presented her with the hotel receipts and notes from my confrontation with Dr. Thompson. Good, this will strengthen your case, she replied, her eyes focused. It's always better to have documentation. As I left her office, I felt empowered. I was taking control of my life, and while it was daunting, it was also exhilarating. The fog of confusion that had clouded my mind was beginning to lift. I had been beaten down, but I could see a path forward. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding myself. I started working out again, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage, and rediscovering who I was outside of being Sarah's husband. I even started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the page as a way to process everything that had happened. But every time I sat down with my thoughts, the pain would rush back, unrelenting and raw. I hadn't yet fully grasped the emotional turmoil I was experiencing, and I found myself oscillating between moments of strength and deep sadness. Then one day, while going through my things, I stumbled across our wedding album. I picked it up, feeling the weight of nostalgia wash over me. It was filled with smiles and love, a testament to a time when everything felt perfect. I opened it, and as I flipped through the pages, I was hit with a wave of memories, the laughter, the vows, the promises we made to each other. But with each turn of the page, I felt the bitterness of betrayal clawing at my heart. I closed the album, feeling overwhelmed. I had to let go of that version of our story. The love we once shared didn't erase the reality of her choices. It was painful, but I was starting to come to terms with it. I realized I couldn't cling to the past anymore. I had to accept the truth and allow myself to feel the pain fully if I wanted to move forward. It was time to let go of the illusion of what my marriage was supposed to be and face the reality of what it had become. In my heart, I knew I had to make a decision soon. I couldn't stay in limbo forever, but the thought of divorce still terrified me. I knew it was coming, but taking that step felt monumental. I wasn't ready to face the world alone, yet I was also tired of feeling inadequate, of living in the shadow of someone else's betrayal. And so, I began to prepare for the next chapter of my life, whatever that may look like. I was ready to take the plunge into the unknown, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my power. As days passed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, teetering between moments of clarity and debilitating doubt. Each time I thought I was ready to make a decision about my marriage, a wave of fear would crash over me, pulling me back into uncertainty. It was a maddening cycle, but I was determined to break free. One evening, after another long day of work, I came home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a shadow of the woman I had married, and a part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered everything, the betrayal, the lies, and that flicker was extinguished almost instantly. "I wanted to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I know I've hurt you. I never wanted to destroy our marriage." I stood at the doorway, arms crossed, my heart pounding. "You did destroy it, Sarah. You made your choices. You made a mockery of our commitment." "I know," she replied, tears welling in her eyes, "but I want to make it right. I want us to go to therapy again, together this time. I want to work on us." "Do you really think that can fix this?" I asked, incredulous. "Do you think a couple of therapy sessions can erase the fact that you cheated on me with our therapist? It wasn't just sex," she insisted, her voice rising. It was emotional, and I was so confused. I thought I needed to explore my feelings, and I got caught up in it. "I know it doesn't excuse my actions, but please just give me a chance to prove that I can change." I felt a surge of anger. "Prove it? How? By lying to me again? You had your chance, Sarah." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "You think we can just go back to the way things were? That we can pretend none of this happened?" "No, I don't want to pretend," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I want to be better. I want to be better for you, for us." I could see the desperation in her eyes, but it only fueled my anger. "You say you want to be better, but you've already shown me who you are. I can't trust you anymore. You shattered my trust when you made the decision to sleep with someone else." "Please," she begged, her voice desperate. "I'm willing to do anything. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." "Love isn't enough," I snapped, feeling the weight of her words crashing down on me. "Love doesn't excuse betrayal. You don't get to decide how I should feel about this." She fell silent, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I watched as the woman I had once loved so fiercely crumbled before me, and though my heart ached for her, I couldn't allow myself to be swayed. I had to stay strong. The discussion left me feeling drained, and I retreated to the bedroom, seeking solitude. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall blankly. The reality of my situation pressed heavy on my chest. I had to make a decision, and every moment I delayed only fueled the pain. The following days blurred together as I wrestled with my thoughts. I spent more time analyzing my feelings, trying to separate my anger from my desire for closure. I had begun to realize that while I was furious with Sarah, I was just as angry with myself for allowing things to spiral so far out of control. One evening, I had a breakthrough. I sat down with my journal, allowing myself to write freely about my feelings. I poured out my anger, my hurt, and my confusion, and as I wrote, I found clarity. I wrote about how I felt betrayed and how I had to learn to prioritize my own well-being. I wrote about the man I wanted to become, a man who recognized his worth and wouldn't settle for less. As I wrote, I came to a decision. I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a cycle of hurt and confusion. It was time to set boundaries, to take control of my life. I picked up my phone and called Corinne, the lawyer I had consulted earlier. "Hi, it's me," I said when she answered. "I want to move forward with the divorce." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice steady. "This is a big step." "I'm sure," I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I need to reclaim my life. I can't keep waiting for something to change." She guided me through the next steps, outlining what would happen and what I needed to prepare. As we spoke, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was the direction I needed to take, and it felt empowering. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork, but I was resolute. I started distancing myself emotionally from Sarah, focusing on my own healing and growth. I spent more time with friends, rekindling relationships that had taken a backseat during my marriage. I found solace in their support, leaning on them as I processed the emotional fallout of my situation. But there were moments when I felt the sting of loneliness creeping in. Evenings alone felt heavy, and sometimes I found myself missing the companionship we had shared, even if it was built on a false foundation. I reminded myself that it was normal to feel this way, that healing wasn't linear. I also began to reflect on the lessons I was learning. I was discovering my own strength and resilience, realizing that I had the power to define my life on my own terms. I was no longer the passive husband waiting for things to get better. I was taking charge of my destiny. As I prepared for the eventual confrontation with Sarah about the divorce, I knew I had to be firm and clear. I wanted her to understand that this decision was not made out of spite but out of necessity. I needed to prioritize my own mental and emotional health above all else. Finally, the day arrived when I felt ready to confront her again. I called Sarah to meet me in the living room. When she entered, I could tell she sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "Is everything okay?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Sit down," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk." Her eyes widened and I could see the panic rising in her chest. "What is it?" "I've made a decision," I began, my heart racing. "I'm going to file for divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I watched as her face fell, a mix of shock and despair washing over her. "Divorce?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "You can't be serious." "I am serious, Sarah. I can't continue in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I deserve better, and so do you. But we can fix this. You can't just throw everything away because of one mistake." She pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "It's not just one mistake," I said firmly. "It's a pattern of behavior, and I can't put myself through this any longer. I need to move on." Her eyes filled with tears, and a part of me felt pity again. But I reminded myself that this was about me, about my healing. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I need to do what's best for my future." As I watched the realization sink in, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I was taking control, reclaiming my life. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to embrace it, ready to build a new future for myself. In that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. I was shedding the weight of the past and stepping into a new chapter, one where I could focus on healing, growth, and ultimately, my own happiness. As the days turned into weeks following the decision to file for divorce, I felt a strange mix of liberation and anxiety. I had stepped boldly into the unknown, and while it felt empowering, the reality of it all was daunting. I was embarking on a journey that would change everything about my life and who I was. The process of legal proceedings was unsettling. I attended meetings with Corinne, my lawyer, who guided me through the complexities of divorce law. It felt surreal to be discussing the division of assets and future custody arrangements while grappling with the emotional weight of my marriage's collapse. I was forced to confront painful realities. Our shared life was fracturing, and I had to navigate the turmoil that came with it. During this time, I made a point to maintain boundaries with Sarah. I avoided unnecessary conversations and interactions, keeping everything strictly businesslike. Every time we met to discuss the divorce, I could see the pain etched on her face. I had once known her so intimately, and now she felt like a stranger. The betrayal hung between us like an unspoken ghost, casting shadows on every exchange. One evening, we sat across from each other at the dining table, which now felt like a battleground. I had been reviewing some documents, and Sarah looked lost in thought. I could tell she was struggling with the weight of what was happening, but I felt little sympathy. "Do you ever think about what we could have been?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I raised my eyes to meet hers, feeling a mix of irritation and pity. "What we could have been? Sarah, you threw that away when you chose to cheat. You made your decision, and now we have to deal with the consequences." I wish I could take it back," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I replied, my voice firm. "You can't erase the pain you caused. The trust is gone, and I can't keep pretending like this is all going to work out." Her gaze dropped to the table, and I could see the struggle in her features. "I know I made mistakes. I was lost, and I thought I could fix things by exploring those feelings. I thought I could make it work. I never meant to hurt you." "Intentions don't matter when the actions say otherwise," I said, feeling my resolve harden. "You chose to betray me. You chose to lie. These weren't just mistakes, they were choices you made." The conversation left me feeling drained, yet resolute. I knew I was doing the right thing for myself, but the emotional toll was exhausting. I had to keep reminding myself that I was reclaiming my life, that I was choosing a path that would ultimately lead to my healing. As the divorce proceedings progressed, I started to feel a sense of normalcy returning to my life. I began exploring new hobbies, spending time with friends and rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I joined a local gym, took up running, and even started taking cooking classes. Each new experience felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity, and it was empowering to feel that spark of creativity and joy returning to my life. However, the loneliness sometimes crept in. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, and the weight of solitude would wash over me. I missed the companionship we had shared, even if it was tainted by betrayal. I often found myself reminiscing about the good times, and it felt like a double-edged sword. While I longed for connection, I also knew I couldn't go back to what had been. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I sat down with my journal, pouring my feelings onto the page. I wrote about my hopes for the future, my dreams of finding happiness again, and my determination to learn from this experience. I began to articulate the lessons I had learned about trust, resilience, and self-worth. As I wrote, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I recognized that this journey was not just about ending a marriage. It was about embarking on a path towards self-discovery and healing. I was learning what it meant to stand on my own 2 feet, to embrace the freedom that came with letting go of the past. Then, one evening, as I was leaving the gym after a workout, I ran into an old friend, Jessica, who I hadn't seen in years. We had been close in college but had drifted apart as life took us in different directions. As we chatted, catching up on each other's lives, I felt a spark of connection. She had always been someone I felt comfortable with, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. Jessica listened as I shared a bit about my situation, and instead of pity, she offered understanding. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's a tough situation, but I know you'll come out stronger on the other side," she said, her tone genuine. Her support felt refreshing. I hadn't expected to find comfort in reconnecting with an old friend, but it sparked something in me. We exchanged numbers and made plans to meet up for coffee. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was still room for connection and joy in my life after all. As our coffee date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. It had been a while since I had connected with someone in that way, and I found myself wondering if I was ready to explore new relationships. Could I even open my heart again after everything that had happened? When the day arrived, I found myself smiling as I walked into the cafe. Jessica was already there, a warm smile lighting up her face. We spent hours talking and laughing, reminiscing about our college days while also sharing our recent experiences. The conversation felt easy and natural, a welcome change from the heaviness that had consumed my life for so long. As we parted ways that evening, I felt lighter, buoyed by the connection we had rekindled. I knew I wasn't ready to dive headfirst into a new relationship, but I relished the idea of slowly opening myself up to new possibilities. It was a step forward, a glimmer of hope that perhaps I could find happiness again. As the weeks passed, I began to settle into a new routine. I was learning to enjoy my own company, to appreciate the quiet moments of solitude. I started focusing on my goals, both personal and professional, and I felt a sense of empowerment as I took control of my life. The divorce proceedings continued, and while the process was ongoing, I found myself feeling more resolute. The conversations with Sarah became more businesslike as we hammered out the logistics of our separation. I wasn't feeling the emotional weight of our past as heavily anymore. I had begun to detach myself from the pain. But there was still one conversation I needed to have with her, one final confrontation to close the chapter on our marriage. I wanted to be clear that I was moving on, that I was ready to embrace a future without her. One evening, I asked her to meet me at a local park, a neutral space where we could talk. As I arrived, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. When she arrived, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, but I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to a bench where we could sit down. "I know this is hard," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is hard," I agreed, "but it's necessary. I want to be clear about where we stand. I'm moving forward with my life, Sarah. I need to focus on healing and building a future without you." Tears filled her eyes, and I could see the weight of reality crashing down on her. I understand, she said, her voice trembling. I never thought it would come to this. I know, I replied, allowing her to express her emotions. But I can't keep holding on to what used to be. I need to let go. She nodded, sniffling. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I wish things could have been different. So do I said, my voice steady. But we can't change the past. I need to focus on my future now. As we spoke, I felt a sense of closure beginning to wash over me. This was the moment I needed to end the chapter of our marriage, to reclaim my own narrative. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said quietly, her eyes filled with regret. I hope you do too, I replied sincerely. As we parted ways that day, I felt a profound sense of relief. I was stepping into a new chapter, ready to embrace whatever came next. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it wouldn't define who I was. I was forging ahead with newfound strength, ready to create a life filled with joy, connection, and self-discovery. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my decision to move on. I was no longer the man who had been shattered by betrayal. I was a survivor, ready to embrace the future with open arms. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. As I stepped into this new chapter of my life, I realized that the journey wasn't just about healing from betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was beneath the layers of hurt and disappointment. I had spent so long wrapped up in the emotional turmoil of my marriage that I had neglected my own dreams, passions, and aspirations. Now, it was time to reclaim those parts of myself. The divorce was finalized, and while the paperwork felt cold and clinical, it also marked a significant turning point in my life. I was free. The weight of uncertainty that had lingered over me for so long had finally lifted, and I felt a sense of lightness that I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if I could breathe again. With my newfound freedom, I dedicated myself to pursuing the things that brought me joy. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects and striving for growth in my career. I enrolled in evening classes, diving into subjects I had always been passionate about but never had the time to explore. I found excitement in learning again, and it felt invigorating to challenge myself in new ways. One of my favorite decisions was to join a local hiking group. Nature had always been a source of solace for me, and I felt drawn to the idea of exploring the outdoors with new friends. Each hike was an adventure, filled with breathtaking views and the companionship of fellow outdoor enthusiasts. It felt good to be surrounded by positivity and to connect with others who shared a love for the great outdoors. As I formed new friendships, I began to open up about my past, and I was surprised by the support I received. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, sharing their own stories of heartbreak and recovery. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. Everyone faced their own battles and learned to rise from the ashes in their own ways. Through these connections, I learned about empathy and vulnerability. I found that sharing my experiences not only helped me heal but also allowed others to do the same. Each conversation was cathartic, and I felt a sense of community enveloping me. I was no longer just trying to survive, I was thriving. Yet, even amidst all this growth, there were moments of reflection. I would occasionally think of Sarah and what had transpired between us. I wondered how she was doing and if she had truly learned from her mistakes. But those thoughts were fleeting. I had come to understand that I couldn't control her journey. I could only focus on my own. As summer turned to fall, I found myself at a crossroads. I had been dating casually, rekindling the excitement of new relationships without the heaviness of expectation. One evening, I met someone who caught my attention, Megan, a fellow hiker with a contagious smile and an adventurous spirit. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and kindness. Unlike past relationships, I approached this one with caution, aware of my own vulnerabilities and the lessons I had learned. I communicated openly with Megan about my past, and she reciprocated with honesty and understanding. It felt refreshing to be with someone who embraced both the light and dark aspects of life without judgment. As our connection deepened, I began to realize that I was ready to open my heart again. I had spent so long building walls to protect myself, but being with Megan felt safe. It was a chance to create something new without the baggage of betrayal weighing us down. One crisp afternoon, we sat atop a scenic lookout after a challenging hike. The view was breathtaking, and as I looked out over the landscape bathed in golden light, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Megan reached for my hand, and I turned to her, feeling a surge of gratitude for this moment. "I'm glad we met," she said softly, her eyes sparkling. "I feel like we understand each other in a way that's so rare." I smiled, the warmth of her words resonating deeply within me. "Me too. I've been through a lot, but I feel like I'm finally coming into my own again." As I spoke, I realized that I was no longer the man defined by betrayal. I was a survivor, someone who had faced the storm and emerged stronger and more resilient. I had learned to trust again, not just in others but also in myself. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow around us, I knew I was ready to embrace this new chapter fully. Life would always have its ups and downs, but now I had the tools to navigate them. I could face whatever came my way because I had learned to prioritize my own happiness and well-being. The journey through heartache had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered the power of self-love and the importance of surrounding myself with people who uplifted me. I had learned that sometimes you must let go of what no longer serves you to make room for something beautiful and unexpected. As I looked into Megan's eyes, I felt a sense of hope for the future. It was a future filled with possibilities where I could embrace love, friendship, and adventure without fear. I was ready to step into the unknown, to welcome whatever life had in store, and to live with intention and purpose. In that moment, everything felt right. I had turned the page on a painful chapter and opened my heart to a new beginning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning.